Hello, Year 9, and welcome to today's lesson. You'll be pleased to see that after the brief technical hitch earlier, we are now back to using video. This lesson is the conclusion of my introduction to adverts. Let's start off with a knowledge retrieval task. Last time we were talking about the importance of slogans, and slogans need to be memorable and catchy. The current slogan for Fram is excellence, compassion and respect for all. Used to be turning potential into performance. Now, as a knowledge retrieval task, I wonder, can you come up with a new slogan for Fram which is both memorable and honest? I'll give you a few minutes to think about that and to jot down your idea for a new slogan. And then when you're ready, move on. We need to think a little bit not only about why adverts have changed because of social contexts, and remember, adverts have changed as society has changed, but also because of the way that people have changed in terms of their ability to interpret the media. Adverts have become a lot more visually driven and a lot less text driven. You'll notice in these adverts for Pepsi from the middle of the 20th century, there are images, but there is a lot of text. There is an expectation that people are going to spend the time to read the copy. You can't really imagine finding an advert with that amount of text on it today, even if that advert was trying to communicate something very important about, for example, public health. You can see here that a contemporary advert for Pepsi is far more visually driven. So why do you think adverts have become more about the image and less about the text? Basically, advertising has become more soft sell and less hard sell. Basically, advertising has had to change because the nature of audiences have changed. We've talked a lot about the theories behind audiences. We haven't really thought about the effect that changes in the world and changes in society have had in audiences. Life is a lot faster than it was when advertising first started, and there is a lot more media out there. When advertising first started, the majority of the audience would be reading magazines or watching television. That's where the bulk of advertising appeared. And people were a little bit more likely to believe what the advertisers said. There weren't the kind of controls on adverts that there are now, the level of regulation. So it was a lot easier for advertisers to make claims that weren't true, partly because of regulation becoming tighter and partly because of audiences becoming more aware that they can't necessarily trust what they see on the media. The audience is less likely to believe the claims of advertisers, and so advertisers have to be very careful what they say. If they include information that isn't true or bends the truth, they might have to take the advert down, and that's a very costly mistake. They might also damage the brand. They might damage the credibility of the brand if they make claims that aren't true. It's a lot easier now for advertisers to let the audiences do the work. I mean, if you think about that Brexit advert we looked at a little while ago, that advert did not out and out state that if we left the EU, we would be given £350 million to the NHS. It allowed the audience to do the work. As I mentioned, life is a lot quicker now. People are a lot more likely, firstly, to be doing a lot more things. There's less time available. If you're reading a magazine, then you may have a lot of other things that are playing on your mind. You just won't have time to read the adverts. You're very likely to flick past the adverts as quickly as you can. Therefore, from the advertiser's point of view, a strong visual image is going to be far more powerful, something that's going to stick in your mind after a couple of seconds than an advert with a lot of text on it. And similarly, if you think about billboards, you're only going to see those for a few seconds as you go past. The visual image needs to be very, very strong. Links to this is the fact there is a lot more media out there. When the advertising industry first started, there were only a small number of media forms: newspapers, magazines, television, not even advertising on the radio in the UK, because there was no commercial radio in the UK, although they did have advertising in the US. So now there are far more media forms which are trying to grab your attention, and advertisers don't have as long to try and make their case, which means that very wordy adverts aren't really going to work. Um, Linked to that is that as an audience, our media consumption has moved away from print. Print, I'm not saying it's a dying form, but it is certainly a form which is in the descendant. And a lot of print advertising used to be a lot, like the Omo advert or like the adverts that we've looked at. They used to be very driven by the copy. There was the expectation that people would sit and read. It's a sad fact, however, that we have moved more towards audiovisual, television, and particularly games and the internet. And so people are less likely to simply want to sit and read copy, particularly the copy of adverts. Finally, that links to the fact that the audience has become more media savvy. When advertising first started, first became an industry in the 40s and 50s, the audience were a lot more naive. The audience were a lot more likely to believe things that they saw on TV, that they heard on the radio, they read in the newspapers. They didn't believe that they would be misled, and therefore they were more likely to believe the claims that were being made by advertisers. Now, I think, given what we know about the media, we are less likely to believe those claims. These are all the reasons why advertising has changed. Let's have a look at a couple more adverts from the 1930s and the 1950s. The 1930s advert is for Craven A cigarettes. The 1950s advert is for Maltesers chocolate. I'd like you to answer the questions. What are these advertising? What claims are being made for the products? What images are they portraying? Could the companies make the same claims for these products today? Why and why not? Spend about 5 minutes answering those questions. Well, of course, the first advert is advertising cigarettes. The second advert is advertising chocolates. The Craven A advert, the tagline, the slogan is, "For your throat's sake, smoke." The advert is suggesting that if you smoke cigarettes, it will make you healthy. The Maltesers advert is suggesting that if you eat the chocolates, they will help you get thin. These claims are being supported by two images of very happy, comparatively attractive women, implying that if you do these things, you will be like these women. Now, obviously, these companies could not make the same claims today. The smoking advertising has been all but banned, and it's been a long time since cigarette companies were allowed to suggest that their product had any health benefits. Why could Craven A get away with it in the 1930s? Because we didn't know, the science hadn't worked out that cigarettes were actually very bad for your health. That didn't really happen until the 1950s at the earliest, and there were still cigarette adverts when I went to school, although to be fair, they did tend to have a warning that said smoking can damage your health. Similarly, the chocolate advert suggesting that chocolate can actually benefit you is not something that could happen now because although chocolate is nowhere near as bad as cigarettes, it still obviously is not a food that is going to help you lose weight. So these companies could not make these claims today, and that's partly because the society wouldn't accept it. Society, I think, knows how cigarettes are bad for you and chocolate's bad for you, and partly because the regulator wouldn't allow it. If an advert like this appeared, it would be immediately banned. Here's another interesting advert. These are two adverts for Lego. One of them is from 2013 and one of them is from 1981. And I wonder, what are the similarities and what are the differences? The copy at the bottom of the 2013 one says, "It's a garden, a pirate ship, a castle, an island, an enchanted forest, and an epic adventure. It's exactly what she wants it to be. She's an explorer, a builder, a designer, a creator, and an inventor. She's every child that ever spilled a bucket of Lego bricks onto the carpet and made them her own. She's not just showing you what she made, she's showing you what she's made of. It's a Lego thing." And that's Lego Friends. Just have a look at the Lego there. It's the Lego colours. And the 1981 advert. What it is beautiful. Have you ever seen anything like it? Not just what she's made, but how proud it's made her. It's a look you'll see whenever children build something all by themselves, no matter what they've created. Younger children build for fun. Lego Universal building sets for children aged 3 to 7 have colourful bricks, wheels and friendly Lego people for lots and lots of fun. Older children build for realism. Lego Universal building sets for children 7 to 12 have more detailed pieces like gears, rotors and treaded tyres for more realistic building. One set even has a motor. Lego Universal building sets will help your children discover something very, very special themselves. Jot down, if you can, a few similarities and differences between those two adverts, and then we'll move on to the next slide. Now, it's interesting, isn't it? Because in their ways, both the adverts play about with stereotyping and countertyping. They both contain girls as the main character. The older advert contains a younger girl. The newer advert is a slightly older girl. The older advert doesn't really focus on gender at all. The actual copy talks about children, and the copy is focused on the idea of children. The newer advert is more about the nature of the builder, the girl who I suspect is probably slightly preteen. Um, so, to my mind, there's an interesting consideration here of the nature of children and the way children are presented. The focus here on the Lego Friends advert is interesting, I think, because whereas the 1980s advert is more about children creating stuff, I think this advert is this and we're looking at now, the Friends one, is particularly about saying Lego is not just for boys. This is about Lego being for girls, the use of she all the way through, and the idea of the Lego Friends bricks. I mean, if you noticed, I can't scroll the wheel back on this, but the bricks in the 1980s advert are all the primary colour traditional Lego bricks. The bricks in Lego Friends have these kind of pastels and pinks, which you could argue is more stereotypical for females, and yet the copy is trying to challenge perhaps the kind of things we'd expect a girl to make. You know, things like pirate ships, castles, and things like that. Um, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it, that the older advert is perhaps a little bit less stereotypical in some ways, and that whereas this advert seems to be a little bit more about both reinforcing and challenging stereotypes. We're going to jump back to the past now. You've probably seen this poster before. It's quite a famous poster from the 1900s. It's a World War One era poster, and it's from 1915. It's designed to persuade men to join the army. And I'd like you to think specifically about how gender is being represented here. And I want you to think about the work we did on essentialism and social constructionism. So look at these three figures, look at the slogan. What attitudes are being presented towards gender here? What elements would you say are essentialist? Is there any evidence of social constructionism? Spend about 5 minutes jotting down your ideas. Again, it's fine to bullet point these and then move on to the next slide. I would imagine you probably decide that the advert is mainly essentialist. It does seem to cast these characters in fairly traditional roles. You've got a girl child and a boy child. The girl child is reading, and the implication is that she is reading something to her father. She's looking at a history book. It's a story about the Great War, and she's asking, "Daddy, what did you do in the Great War?" And that suggests that she perhaps is fulfilling that traditional role of the girl doing something quiet and perhaps a little bit less interactive than the boy. The boy is obviously playing soldiers, and if that's not a particularly unsubtle image, then there we go. The boy doesn't seem to be engaging at all with what the conversation that the girl and the dad are having, which is interesting. The way they're dressed, obviously very traditional for the early part of the 19th century. The suit the guy is wearing is quite interesting because he presumably is sitting relaxing with his kids after his day's work, and it's obviously very formal attire, very traditional gear. He's got a very traditional Edwardian hairstyle. So again, he is a very stereotypical figure. And interestingly, there is no mother. Mother is not in the equation at all. Presumably, mother's in the kitchen making the tea. So very traditional gender roles being presented here. Let's take a look at some other OMO adverts. We've already looked at an OMO advert. We're going to go and look at that advert in more detail in a couple of weeks' time. These are other adverts for OMO that were around about the same time. And again, what I'd like you to do is just in your own words, I'd like to jot down the kind of attitudes about women that are being represented in these adverts. And do you think that the way women are represented in adverts has changed in in recent times? Note down the attitudes about women, the way women are being presented, and whether you think representations have changed. The bottom two adverts are French, and the translation is something like, "I have the cleanest shirt in the world." This is kind of leading us to think about how dominant ideologies affect adverts. When we consider media products, we need to understand the values of the society at the time, and these are dominant ideologies. We've already discussed these when we talked about representation. And as dominant ideologies change, the representations in those adverts changed. In those OMO adverts, as indeed with many adverts from the 1950s and the 1960s, the values of 1960 society were that women should be obedient, that women basically their job was to look after the home, and there were certain things that women could not or should not do. And one might suggest there's an advert there for Mini Automatic, the Mini Automatic for simple driving, and there are very clear implications about the image and the nature of women and driving, which I suspect you might, if you are a woman, feel a little bit upset about. Comparing that to the Fiat advert for the Fiat 500, life's too short to wear a boring car. Well, you could argue that there are certain stereotypical elements there, but certainly the relationship between the woman and the car is very different to that in the Mini advert. In the Fiat advert, the dominant ideology is clearly one about females being in control. The woman on top of the car, it demonstrates her dominance and that she has power in that equation. The Mini Automatic advert, clearly the dominant ideology there is that putting women in a car is a really bad idea unless you have a car that is simple to drive. And it is clearly quite a sexist advert. You can see the copy here. The Mini Automatic does one little thing more for you. It changes gear without you changing gear. This little thing can make all the world of difference in all kinds of driving conditions. So you can see here that the Mini advert is really quite sexist. The Fiat advert, Sandra P is really rocking the retro vibe with her Fiat 500 and a yummy countrypolitan yellow. I never even know the word countrypolitan. Part of the 70s inspired colour therapy range. So anyway, you can see here very different attitudes to women and cars, thankfully. Now, can you remember the name of the advertising regulator and can you remember what it does? The advertising regulator is called the Advertising Standards Authority, and please make sure that you've written this down. The Advertising Standards Authority. And the Advertising Standards Authority, this is what it does. It makes sure that all UK advertising is legal, decent, honest, and truthful. It's funded by a levy on advertising space. That basically means that advertisers have to pay a small amount of money to the ASA to keep it running. So it's paid for by advertisers. It's therefore a self-regulated body. It's independent from the advertisers and from government. So it's not like Ofcom, which is a government regulator. It checks adverts and acts on complaints. So it doesn't censor adverts before they come out unless it's shown the adverts. But if even a single person complains about an advert, the ASA will check it, and if it breaks their guidance, they will remove it. It makes sure that consumers are protected from misleading, harmful, or offensive adverts. And as I've said, a single complaint can lead to an advert being withdrawn if there's something wrong with the advert. So in your own words, please, and in your books, I'd like you to explain what the ASA is and what it does. When you've done that, move on. Now, it's worth knowing that children in particular are protected by the ASA, and there are certain things that might cause the ASA to become involved in adverts that you need to know. And these are, for example, violence being shown as humorous. Now, it's interesting, if you look at the NSPCC Cartoon Boy advert, there is violence there, but the context of the advert doesn't make it humorous. It makes it quite chilling. Advertising alcohol around children's programs, that's a bad idea. Advertising gambling at tea time. In fact, I think now gambling is almost banned as they're being advertised. Using a children's TV celebrity to advertise fast food. That's quite an interesting one. Images of guns being brandished in an aggressive manner. Now you'll notice that in 2017, nearly 75%, nearly three quarters of the complaints that the ASA dealt with were to do with misleading adverts. And that does seem to be a major issue for the ASA, adverts misleading the audience. Make sure you've jotted down in your own words, the kind of things that the ASA might look at, and then move on to the next task. Right, we're gonna play banned or allowed. We're gonna see some adverts. You decide whether the ASA asked them to be withdrawn or allowed. Now, this obviously works a lot better if we've got a studio audience, if you like, which we don't have. So if you do have someone around that you can play banned or allowed with, that's great. Otherwise, you'll just have to do it on your own. Why were the adverts withdrawn? Why were they allowed? And explain why. Here is an advert for a gambling website, onlinegambler.com, and this was found online. Was this banned or allowed? It was banned. It was banned because they used the comic book character, and that is likely to appeal to children. And so, regardless of the context, it breached the code. So the complaint was upheld. This is an advert that was found in a children's clothing catalogue. Was it banned or allowed? It was banned, and it was banned because although the little girl doesn't have the bag on her head, there is the possibility that children would try and copy that image. So the complaint there was upheld. Right, this is for Phones for You, and this was seen on the side of a bus. Miraculous deals on Samsung Galaxy Android phones. Was that banned or allowed? It was banned. It was banned because the ASA agreed that the advert might be seen to be disrespectful to Christians and cause serious offence, and the adverts were banned. Now, this is an advert that was Durex used to sponsor Take That, and people complained about that. Was it banned or allowed? It was allowed, and it was allowed because the ASA thought that people are always, for some reason, going to find adverts for contraceptives distasteful. And in this case, the ASA thought that the very, very implicit sexual reference was unlikely to be understood by young children. And if young children understood it, then therefore it would be reasonable for them to see it. So the complaint was not upheld. This is an advert for the NHS, and this is an anti-smoking advert. And there was also a video campaign that went along. This is actually a billboard advert. Was this banned or allowed? Well, it was both. That's interesting, this one. Basically, the complaint was that the advert was distressing, and adults found it offensive and it was unsuitable to be seen by children. And what the ASA said was that they were suitable for adults, but not suitable for young children. And therefore, they upheld the complaint appearing on a poster that children might see near a school, for example, but not TV ads or targeted media in, for example, magazines that young children were less likely to see. So in this case, a combination of being banned and allowed. It's quite a powerful image in thinking about imagery that we talked about. If you have the time, and obviously it's dependent upon how long this has taken you. It's worth your while having a look on the ASA's website and just having a website and having a look. You can see all the judgments on the website. I'll include the link in the assignment so that you can have a look at that, but only if you've got the time. Right. What I'd like you to do is we're going to be looking in more detail at the Audrey Hepburn advert, and I just want you to do a little bit of preparation for that. What I'd like you to do is I'd like you to re-watch the advert, and I'd like you to answer the questions on the next slide. So question 1, an establishing shot comes first to show us where the action is taking place. Where are we, and what do we associate with this place? Where, you don't need to know the specific name of the village, but what kind of place is it? Question 2, a very long shot is next. This shows us where things are in the scene before we start cutting into closer distances. What information does this very long shot give the audience about what has been happening? Question 2, how does this long shot of the fruit seller cutting to the medium close-up of Audrey add detail to the narrative of the advert? Question 3. Audrey opens her bag before the tall, handsome driver turns up in his sports car. What does this order of events suggest? And you'll notice that it's the Dove version, not the Galaxy version. As before, a kind of long shot with an over the shoulders allows us to focus on both Tall, Dark and Handsome and Audrey. And then we cut between the shot of the bloke and the shot of Audrey. What is this suggesting about the way that their relationship is developing? When you've jotted down your answers to those questions, please make sure that you photographed your work. Please make sure you've uploaded it. Please make sure that your work is attached. Please make sure that you have clicked the turn in button, and then that is it.